introduce Chad Sunderland, the VP of Strategy and Business Consulting at the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. I'm personally super excited to learn from Chad. I know this has been a long time coming as he was scheduled to do this workshop back in December. And so without further ado, Chad, I'm so excited that you're here, and I'm excited for you to take it away.
Cool. Thanks, Jenny. Well, I'm also excited to be here. I've heard a lot about NextUp and league apps from my friends Jenny and Benita Fitzgerald-Mosley, so I'm pumped to be with you guys today. They asked me to talk a little bit about how to make better data-driven decisions. I work for the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee in a role that is about making us a more informed organization. We've been through a pretty significant journey in that and going through a lot of transformational bumps along the way. I'm hoping that our journey can be something that folks who are on this call can learn from, and maybe some of the tips and tricks that we've taken on will be helpful for you. I want to start because of the way this presentation mode works, curious to know who's on with us. So I want to invite everyone before we kind of jump in, just to put your name and what organization that you work for, chat here, so we get a sense of who all is here. I'll ask a little bit more from folks around what you're hoping to get out of this day, and we'll make sure that we hit on all of those points. But in the meantime, if you could just put your name and the organization you work for, that would be awesome. That'll give me a little bit of a sense of making sure that we're hitting on things that are relevant to y'all. Martin, good to see you. Jimmy Dunk, wow, like best sport name ever. Our Olympic champion, Benita Fitzgerald-Mosley, good to see you today. New York City parks, that's fabulous. I lived in New York for a while. And the parks are such an amazing way to get away from the city. Fabulous. Cool. All right, well, as folks continue to add their names and their organizations, I'm gonna move on a little bit. So I'll start by introducing myself. This is me at the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center in the 90s. And I love to start here because my journey started here and it has sort of ended up here as well. I'm a super passionate sport fan. I grew up the child to two PE teachers. I was a swimmer in college, and all of the great character development skills I feel like I learned in my life, I learned through sport. And so I've had a weird career background. I worked for the oil and gas industry for a while. I was a consultant for Accenture. I worked for an internet startup in New York and have found my passion back working for sport at the Olympic and Paralympic Committee. But it's been super fun. When I took the job, I heard we were under historic amounts of stability. The Olympic and Paralympic Games were still in the bid process for Los Angeles to potentially be a host site in 2024. And I was excited to like take on something that was just onward and upward. And there have been lots of changes in our world over the last few years, needed transformational changes, but lots of huge opportunity on the horizon. I work in a team that's called the Strategy and Business Consulting team. We are an internal consulting department that does strategic planning, project management, process improvement, and data analytics as a service for the rest of the organization, as well as our 50 national governing bodies. So we are a service to all. We take on a very service leadership-minded approach. And we've been really responsible for helping to bring data and analytics to all things that we do to make more transparent, relationships and ensure that there's more objective decision making across the board. So that is a little about me. We also have Martin on the call. We may ask Martin at a few points here to share some feedback. Originally, this presentation was built for a larger group, so we were going to do some polling along the way. Instead, we'll probably ask those questions to Martin and in the chat for folks, because I'm not sure it'll be that interesting to get polling going with the group, but we'll try it out to see the size of the group and whether that's worth it. Either way, we'll make sure that you guys are getting what you're hoping to get out of this meeting and this conversation out of it. For the folks who are leading this, Jenny or Tex, can we have Martin just give a 30-second intro for himself?
Hey, Chad. Can you hear me? Me, Chad? Okay.
I can hear
Hi,
you.
how are you? Good.
Doing good, doing good. I was hoping you could introduce yourself to the group, a little bit of your background, what you do, why this topic is interesting. And then as we go along, I may pull you up onto the stage a few other times, kind of have a quick conversation about some of the questions.
Well, thanks for having me as part of this discussion. Hello to everyone that's on the chat. My name is Martin Brown. I'm the president at Steel Sports. Steel Sports is an organization that youth sports organization and a social impact organization that offers teams, programming, as well as camps, clinics, tournaments, leagues across the country. Currently in 9 states, in 3 sports, in soccer, baseball, and softball. We also own the facility in Long Island known as Baseball Heaven, and the the National Youth Baseball Championships as well, that takes place every July. I've been involved in youth sports since I came to the US 20 years ago, mainly in soccer. And over the last couple of years, I've been involved with Steel Sports. It's been getting to know some of the other sports that we have at our organization. Well, data is important, I think, to most organizations, particularly from our perspective. We are part of a publicly traded organization known as Steel Partners. Steel Partners is a large organization with about 5,500 employees around the world, owns about 17 different operating companies. And as part of a large organization like that, data is very important across our entire network of organizations, whether it's from a financial perspective, a social impact perspective, human resources perspective. So it's certainly a great topic. And I think as more and more platforms and more technology has become used across organizations in different industries over the last few years, you have the platforms and the technology to really gather that data in a usable and friendly way, which is how really we use that data, those little pieces of different puzzles, and put them together to make decisions on the big picture. So
nice. Well, it sounds like a really good use of data to connect across all of the different pieces of the business that you're related to. And interesting, as someone who's living in a not-for-profit world but has lived in the other sort of for-profit and venture capital and publicly traded world, I imagine that the accountability that comes with data makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Like making those decisions and then having those decisions evaluated and looked over at a higher level than myself, even though running Steel Sports, the corporate structure above us in our organization, the data becomes very important when you're making those decisions and evaluating where you are as an organization.
Cool. Well, so nice to have you with us. I will pull you up here maybe a couple more times Jenny and Tex, as we get through some of these questions, to explore a little bit of some of these questions around the lens of Martin, where you're at and what your data journey has been.
Sure, happy
with your
to get involved
organization.
with whatever you need. Thanks.
Awesome. Give me a second here. There we go. I thought I would start with a bit of an introduction about the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee for those of you guys who may not be as familiar with the organization. Our mission is to empower Team USA athletes to achieve sustained competitive excellence and well-being. We're the organization that's been given the responsibility to make sure that the Olympic and Paralympic teams show up at the games every 2 years for the summer and winter Olympic and Paralympic Games. We've also been given the rights to basically own and ultimately monetize the Olympic rings, the Paralympic agitos, the words Olympics and Paralympics. And that's really our major revenue stream, is sponsorship and marketing partnerships with really generous companies who support Team USA athletes, but use the rings and the Olympics and Paralympics as an opportunity to connect with people around the country as sponsors. So that's sort of us in a nutshell. A lot of people assume because we're a National Olympic Committee that we receive money from the government like most other countries. We don't. So in addition to the generous support from our sponsors, we also rely on individual donors to support the team. Our fundraising is it really important to us, and really important from the lens of making sure that we've got the resources to support our athletes, but also for connecting with everyone around the Olympic and Paralympic values. We're only one of 5 National Olympic Committees that also serves the Paralympic world, which is somewhat unique. And we recently became the very only one that includes both Olympics and Paralympics in our name. We've taken integration really seriously, and that's been an important value proposition to both sides, the Olympic and the Paralympics, come together as one Team USA. We operate a variety of different businesses. I'll mention this later, but one of the interesting things that we support is 2 owned and operated training centers, one in Colorado Springs and one in Lake Placid, New York, and then a variety of other partner sites that provide training opportunities for athletes across the country. So in a nutshell, that is a little bit about the USOPC. You mentioned a little bit about the team I work with. We're a team of about 20. We have folks who focus on business consulting and data analytics within that group. We really look at our remit to help streamline decision making across the organization, improve cross-functional collaboration, and expand strategic thinking capabilities. I often talk about our team as the group who gets brought in when something new is happening, when something really is hard is happening, or when folks who normally don't work together need someone to help them gel as a team on a project that might be something that multiple different groups have to work on together. So that's kind of like the setup, a little bit about me, a little bit about my team. I'm curious to know, so that as we go through this conversation today, I'm hitting on the right topics and emphasize the right areas. What are you guys hoping to learn today? So I invite you to include in the chat a little bit about what you think you'd like to learn. And maybe we can bring Martin up also to get some sense of what he thinks might be interesting for the group to hear more about as we walk through today's presentation.
Hey, Chad.
So Martin, thinking about like what, putting yourself in the shoes of the audience, anything that, comes to mind that you hope to learn from either our journey at the USOPC or just generally about the data and analytics journey for organizations who are working towards getting better?
I mean, I think what I know for myself, in the past where we've struggled, I mean, there are obviously certain data, certain metrics which are easy to follow, easy to analyze, right? You think of whether that's your financials, they're relatively simple to look at and make decisions based upon those things. I think where I know as our organization and, prior organizations I've worked with is measuring that either the athlete impact or the impact you're having in your communities that you're a part of, and what you do in that is how to measure those, how to gather that data that is that can help you not only show the impact that you're having in a positive way, but also lend you a journey of how to go make decisions to improve that, right? And I think that's something that we've always kind of struggled with and gone back and forth. And we have, from our social impact, we have a whole kind of scorecard which takes into consideration a lot of different elements to come up with some data so that we can look at it and measure and hopefully have whether it's a change of course or it's doubling down on certain things to have that impact. So I think there are certain elements of the data that are, relatively easy to say, hey, here's a finance, here's a P&L, here's, income and here's expenses. Well, we can cut expenses here and here, and we can have the desired result we're looking at. I think, whether it's, improving the athletic ability of kids or improving their, character ability of kids in the youth sports world and having that impact on them and having that impact in the communities. I think that's certainly something that we've always struggled to figure how we can gather that information, what's relevant, and then how can we use that to make appropriate decisions moving forward.
That's awesome insights. And we've gone through the same data journey and going from a place where we were really focused internally about what do we know about what we have going on to being better listeners and understanding the impact that we have on the athletes and the customers in our world. So I have a little bit on that we can certainly share and talk about how that journey has evolved over time. As I see here from Rob Smith asking how the USOPC is using data in its decision making that can be applied to youth sport not-for-profits, but also just noting how the USOPC is itself connecting with youth sports and local communities. So that's a really good question. In many ways we connect. I'll answer the second one first, but in many ways we connect through the national governing bodies of sports that we support. They are really our key and direct line to the grassroots efforts that are going on. When we think about sport in America, we see it as a bit of a triangle, a pyramid, and our job is to support those national governing body organizations to be the best that they can be to serve the long tail and the pipeline of youth sports. And then, we partner with them as athletes become more elite at the most elite levels to ensure that we're getting the right resources to the right folks so that they feel supported. That's sort of like the data. I think one thing that has changed significantly over the last few years is, in many cases, when I first joined, we were expected to win. But I think we're now being expected to be a role model and set standards for how sport in general operates around the safety of sport, around athlete experiences, holding everyone accountable to raising the bar, making sure that sport culture continues to evolve with the broader culture of the world. And so that's something that we're early in the path of getting better and taking that expectation on. But that's one way that I would describe the way that we see ourselves connecting with the youth sport and local communities, both through our national governing body partners, but also in making sure that we're raising the bar for standards and expectations across the board. Cool. Well, that is good. We will hit on some of these things as we move through presentation. So I had sort of thought generally about, we've got a question from Jimmy Dunk. Martin, can you share any best practices or trends that you've seen within youth sports with respect to the impact of COVID and the challenges we've all faced over the past year?
Jimmy, good to have you on. That's a tough one. I think we certainly could spend probably hours talking about how COVID has affected not only youth sports, our organization, other organizations. I think to kind of boil it down to a big picture is we've tried to do two things at our organization. Is one, we've tried to be out ahead and have the toughest standards for safety for our athletes. So even if they one of the examples I can think of is on the East Coast throughout the winter, obviously majority of our programs or our teams are going indoors. We made a decision that we would only go indoors in facilities that we either we own or we control, so that we can control that sanitization. And if we did need to go indoors, then the owners of those facilities had to meet our standards, regardless of what their standards were, regardless of what the local state board of health or the local state governments were saying. We tried to hold ourselves to the highest standard possible when it came to safety. So if it was a facility that we didn't control, it had to have a certain air system that allowed filtration. We had our athletes wearing masks. And I give a very quick story if I can, Chad, just on this point is we have our facility in Long Island, Baseball Heaven. We have an indoor facility and we run our programming, and a part of our standards were to have our athletes wearing masks. Because we had a panel of experts, epidemiologists, state board of health, doctors that we put together from our contacts to give us advice of what this. I'm not a doctor, I'm not going to make those decisions. So we did get advice from experts and an independent group of experts. And we had, we ran our programs, we had masks on, and then two of our kids went down the street to another facility to join in a particular program. And they were the only two that walked in wearing masks, and everybody else wasn't. And, the mom had said to us that, she was kind of waiting for the kids to kind of come up and say, can we take our mask off? Can we, we're different, and kids don't, like to kind of mold with the group. And at the end, they didn't take anything off. And the mom asked them, why did you not? Said, no, because, I understand that this was the best safety because of the information that we've been given to them. So that was one thing that we certainly tried to do, was to do as much as we can to the best, to the highest standards for our athletes. And then two was we tried to do as much outside as we possibly could, and obviously weather played a factor in that. And those that are in the Northeast will know that February has been kind of the snow Mageddon for the last 4 weeks. That's made things a little bit more difficult. But we always came back to this point of what's in the best interest of the athletes, and the regulations from city and county and state, and particularly for an organization like ours that we're in multiple states, was just very difficult to maintain those standards, because they changed every single day with numbers going up and down. So we really focused on trying to offer alternative. And I said that was the two things. One was the standardization of the high bar of safety, and two was at least still offering virtual opportunities for athletes that maybe weren't comfortable going to a practice, so that they didn't miss out with interaction with their coaches. And those were kind of the two things that we set our bar at. And I'm pretty proud of how we've handled it. It's been extremely difficult for most organizations over the last 12 months almost now. But I think those are the two things that we always kind of came back to. So I hope that answers your question, Jimmy, but please feel free to reach out, and we can chat more if on that topic. It's a little bit off of the data topic, but I think it's certainly an important point. So
yeah, that's it's been such tough times. I'll add a little bit. We at our training sites have traditionally offered youth sport opportunities. So we'll have local swim clubs or boxing clubs that work. But one of the things that's been tough for us is figuring out how to balance access with policy. We're very fortunate to have a physician on staff who's set specific policy up front. But as I've heard the journey that we've gone through, and I know that things are constantly changing, but one of the things that has made it more comfortable for the folks that are operating youth sports in our environments is to be clear about what is expected up front and be really communicative about what our facility is requiring and why. So we've done more than just like set the standards, but there are signs everywhere. There are emails that go out that over communicate what is expected. Has I know been a big difference for some of the programs we've had versus some of the other places in Colorado Springs. Where
on that point, Chad, the one thing that I did leave out on the first answer there was we did have a COVID guidelines that we sent to players and parents. I think we're at version 8 now, with the changes that we've made. So that was something that we were pretty good. We put everything down on paper, and tried to again reach those higher standards, regardless of what the local states or cities ordinances might have been.
Cool. Well, shifting this back to the data analytics stuff, I thought I prepared a few slides just to get things going. I love this more conversational dialogue, and I even asked Jenny, is it possible for us to turn this into a table conversation as we move forward? So while they think about that technically, I'll walk through maybe a couple of these slides in case that they are useful and helpful for folks who are interested in learning more about data or what our data journey has looked like along the way. I'm going to skip the polling. So you may see a couple of slides as we go through here that ask you to poll. Maybe we'll do one fun one just so you guys, if you haven't ever used this tool, it's super neat and you might find value in it. It's called Mentimeter.com. Martin, have you ever used Mentimeter.com?
I haven't. I've used something similar, but I haven't used this one.
So this was cool. It's like a free tool. I mean, this is actually one of the ways that we collect data in a very real-time way. So maybe we'll take 2 minutes here just to give everyone a chance to experience this in a low risk environment. Everyone pull up a browser window on your phone or on a second browser and go to www.menti.com. It should give you a place at the top of the browser to enter a code. And if you enter the code 783190, it's in the chat and it's also on the screen here, it should give you the ability to pick your favorite animal. So this is a fun, just interactive way to collect real-time feedback from folks. It's free, it's simple, it has quite a bit of functionality to do different things. It's great for live stuff. It's not great if you're trying to do a survey of your members, but it can be a great interactive tool. And we use it. It also has some great data capabilities on the back end where you can download the information, slice it and dice it, come back with more insights on the other side. So I won't belabor that because it's more of a fun tool than the data journey, but wanted to share that with folks in case it's interesting. The dog always wins too. I don't know why. It's usually a test run so that everyone knows how they're doing things. So at the USOPC, when we think about data, we've been lucky in that we haven't done data for data's sake. It's never been something that's like you have to make it work. We've done data and analytics always through the lens of how do we inform decisions? And we've been lucky that our leadership has always started with a really specific question that they're looking to get answered. And that question has changed over time, but it's a nice unifying reason for folks to get out of their comfort zone, to invest the time that is required to start a data analytics effort, and to stay the course to make sure that data is actually driving real decision or change along the way. And so I thought I would share a little bit about what our questions have been here. And while this slide advances, I see Jeff Browan says, does anyone else use Tableau or Google Data Studio to analyze your registration data to see where grow leagues or other sorts of insights? I will say that Tableau is our favorite tool at the USOPC, and we've tried a few different things. We haven't worked with Google Data Studios as much. We like the flexibility of Tableau. We've used it for a variety of different things, and we have worked with some of our national governing partners to look at their membership through the lens of Tableau. Sometimes it's in the existing databases that they have, or sometimes we'll do a bespoke sort of outreach to folks. We use Qualtrics typically when we're doing surveys or wanting to get information that's not already in a structured way. But Tableau has been a huge, awesome tool for our team. But at the USOPC, we've gone through a few phases of what questions are driving our analytics efforts as we've grown up over time. We started pretty simple, and you'd think that as the Olympic and Paralympic Committee, this would be something that's just sort of like ingrained in your gut, but there are so many different sports and there's so much changing that our baseline for all data started as just how good are we compared to the rest of the world? If you watch the Olympic and Paralympic Games, the medal table that is produced at the end of each games is often the single point that people use to judge success. But in order to figure out how to optimize the support for each and every athlete, we had to think about it at the next level down. So we started our journey by saying, just how good are we? What does good look like? How do we think about good through the lens of our mission? And we spent a couple of years, frankly, just building that very basic baseline. And once we had that information and we had a good indicator of what good looks like, and our good was more than the medal table. It was the depth of the field. It was the strength of the pipeline. It was an understanding of where certain sports are historically strong and where opportunities were to basically target softer, less competitive sports across the world and across the spectrum of different sports. We started saying, okay, now that we kind of know what good looks like, we need to figure out how to target our resources to get the right outcomes for the right athletes. And that was an exponential increase in thinking about what we were doing as we started to add, information about field of play and success, and thinking about the many different resources that we had to bear. We were like kind of pretty narrowly focused on the first question. And then as we got to the second question, integration of data became really important. Understanding of things that were both quantitative and qualitative became really important. The idea that we do a variety of different things for different sports and different athletes and normalizing across them and bringing them together to inform, what happens when you invest here? Does it get the outputs that you're expecting? Where are you not investing? Transparency to look for gaps. And then ultimately predicting, when we invest in a place, where are we headed? That was another couple of years of work. And, these continue to build on each other. And we're currently in what I would say is phase 3 of our analytical journey, where we're asking ourselves, what do we need to ensure athletes and NGBs are successful on and off the field of play? So as our expectations, as our mission has expanded beyond the expectation of winning, we're having to include a lot more subjective, a lot more information that's coming directly from athletes and our national governing body partners. We're doing a lot more listening and incorporating the qualitative listening with the quantitative work that we've already done has been an interesting journey in and of itself. But it's taken us years to get here. I know some people kind of expect that, data analytics can be done, quickly, can be done broadly, can be done, with as much tools and technologies out there, simply. But our experience has been that hasn't been true. Having that single-minded question is really important. Letting that question evolve as you get good at something has been really important. And also making sure that we're thinking about where we're focusing our efforts has been important to us. When I think about the Olympic and Paralympic Committee, I think we run 6 different businesses all under one roof. We're sort of a venture capital company thinking about how do we place dollars in the hands of athletes and NGVs for the right outcomes around winning on the field of play. We're an events and logistics company, moving people and things all over the world to create basically a little mini city in sometimes very challenging environments over a 1 month long period every other year, and then pulling it down and doing it again in a totally different place with totally different infrastructure. We're sort of a brand marketing agency in that much of our resources come from how we monetize the marks that we've been granted the rights for, and how do we service sponsors in ways that they can know that their message is connecting with the broader public and youth athletes in America, so that their business goals are being achieved. We're a fundraising organization. We're directly connecting with Americans to ask them to share generously to help Team USA. We're sort of like a hotel in many ways at the training centers that we operate, and also a venue for hosting events, but also creating training environments. And then we're a healthcare provider. We provide health insurance to the most elite athletes. We have on-site medical clinics that have multiple disciplines under one roof, supporting athlete well-being and wellness. So there's a lot going on. And we've had to make our decisions less around which line of business do we want to focus on, but what are the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. We started with field of play. If you look at these kind of different ways of cutting the business on the right, we sort of moved into operational effectiveness and program management. And I would say now our analytical efforts, so we've checked those boxes, is more focused on the stakeholder engagement side of things. So, we've been not focused functionally, but more focused from an business outcomes perspective. And as we've moved along, we've gotten better and better at these 6 different areas that I think are interesting ways to evaluate, like, where are your most pressing priorities and where would you choose to focus your time and efforts, knowing that it's hard to do everything at once. So I'll pause here. Martin, I'd be interested to hear from you, as you guys have thought about your analytical efforts. Does this list of things on the right, kind of what business outcomes you're aiming to do, does that resonate with you? Is there an area that you guys have mostly focused on? Is there something missing from this that you would say is actually more important than this lens of different places that you could focus your time?
I agree with this. The one area that we've spent a lot of time, and I know that a lot of youth sports clubs also do, particularly those that field teams, is as standardization. So that's one area that we've spent a lot of time. We offer multiple products, whether it's teams, camps, programs, leagues, tournaments. So we've tried to standardize that so they feel like Steel Sports programs or events, and people walk away with that same thing. So it kind of goes into a little bit of that customer satisfaction, but that would be the only other. I think these pretty much hit home to what we've been working on, and then I would add the standardization across that as well. from a process, but also from a
Gotcha.
standard, when I say standardization, I mean from a process, policies, as well as, you know, a marketing and an external position as well.
Gotcha. And if you think about your journey where you guys have started, was there one area of emphasis beyond the standardization from this list that you feel like is
field of play would be the one that stands out, you know, for us, helping, you know, our athletes, which are obviously our kids, our families, you know, be able to perform and what we can do to improve them, both on, and when we say perform, I'm talking a little bit different probably to yourself, is I'm talking about on field and off field, you know, and you know, teaching kids those life lessons through sports, character building, leadership traits as well. So I would include that on our side from a field of play, but that's the one that really would stand out for me because that's what we're about. It's about our kids. So.
Yeah, and I think that reflects why we started with, you know, how are we winning against the rest of the world? I mean, that was the foundational business question that was driving what we needed to do before you could get to some of these other things about like, how do you make more money or how do you like do things easier? Just setting a baseline for like, what is the business and can we capture it in an analytical way was really valuable for us. And then it gave everyone else excitement because it was part of the core business to be a part of the analytical journey themselves. So it's good to hear that that's something that resonated with you guys as you guys.
Yeah, and we launched that, you know, with a lot of surveys, a lot of professional development of our coaches, evaluations of our coaches and what they were teaching, in-person evaluations of coaches, and then evaluations of the kids themselves, and then also both kids and parent feedback surveys as well to try and hopefully, you know, to measure that.
I love it. So I'm hearing is a lot of these things also interrelate, but this might be an interesting framework for folks to think about. You're starting an analytics effort. Here are some of the general areas that you can emphasize. Awesome. This is the part where I would normally ask everyone on the call, but since we've got a small sample size, we're going to skip this one and move on to the next slide here. So I wanted to share a little bit about what we learned around what does an analytics effort look like. It can sometimes be overwhelming for folks if you are not sure where to start. So as we've thought about our investment in data analytics, I mean, one, it's been focused on people, but how we organize our people has been thoughtful in these three different areas. The first is like around data collection and storage, like just how are you getting information into one place so that it can be used? Sometimes that's the hardest part of the first step on the journey. You know, people have things in their head, they have things in separate spreadsheets. Maybe they're not used to working in numbers at all, and they're used to working in words. We did part of our process was getting things into one place. Part of our process was also connecting with other people who had information that was going to be useful for us. So we partnered with a firm called InfoStrata. They've been bought multiple times, but they basically collect information on all sporting event results across the world. So we chose not to try to do that heavy lift ourselves and borrow someone else's hard work, which has been an amazing, awesome partnership along the way. And I have to imagine that that's one thing that League Apps and this awesome community can probably benefit this group of folks from. The second area we organize people around is insights and analysis. We're not expecting the people who are collecting the data to also do all of the work to figure out what does the data say. So even when we were a small team of just a couple of people, we brought in skills that were, who's on the ground, who can really make sure that this information is one place. And then we thought about how do we pair them with someone, whether or not they had a full-time data analytics job that could really see that information and pull out the so what about it. And then the last thing, and I think this is the key to our success, has been, data doesn't just live in a spreadsheet, it doesn't just live in a database, but we've really focused on communication and storytelling throughout. So, we spend a lot of intention making sure that things look nice, that they're in context, that it's not just a graph thrown in front of someone, but there is a storyline that goes along with it and a reason to be talking about it, and addresses a reason someone on the other side cares about it. Sometimes I think organizations can get so focused on the data, and because sometimes the storytelling skill and the data analytical skills don't come with the same person, that you forget to do both sides of this coin. And it's been a huge differentiation for us versus some of the partners we work with in success and adoption of data, is really focusing on that communication and storytelling aspect of it. Moving along here, I won't spend a ton of time on this, but just wanted to share that, like, you know, it's awesome when you can have every tool in your tool belt, but even an organization like ours has had a limited amount of dollars to invest in things. And we started out with free stuff that we had available to us to prove out that this was going to be valuable work. So, you know, everything we started off was in Excel and PowerPoint and Outlook. And as we've grown, we've kept Excel because it's sort of like an ever-present thing. We've added a really powerful tool in Tableau. So Jeff, who was asking about that, you know, we started with a free version and now we pay for it, but it does three things. It gives you a place to collect information and be able to see what you've collected. It is really powerful in thinking about how you can apply analytical things, and probably the coolest thing about it, and we evaluated a few different tools that could do all of these things, but like their canned ability to make things pretty and readable and understandable is really nice. It can sometimes feel limiting, but our team has used Tableau for all of those things. It really sits across all three of these areas, but I think of it as a communication and storytelling tool most. The place we've added the most new things is in the data collection and storage, as we've had to figure out how to connect more things along the way. And you know, we've started to invest in some tools that can integrate all of the data in an effective way, but that's been really a manual effort up to this point for us in many ways, and something that we're not trying to solve by coding it ourselves. So I hope that as you guys think about partners and your growth and maturity on the data analytics curve, that it's something that you're looking for partners in an ecosystem and folks who do this awesome, so that you can focus on bringing sort of the insights and the analytics, but don't have to invest in the infrastructure itself. Getting close to the end of time here, and so I'll buzz through a few more of these slides here. I was interested to know what folks are using, but we'll skip this slide, and I'll leave you with two things. One, just basically how we have quantified our evolution over time. You know, because analytics is something that you can look at through an analytical lens, we've spent some time looking at ourselves and also looking at our partners at NGBs to evaluate and create a framework around, like, how do you know where you're at on the analytical journey and what's next along the way? So this is the framework that we use. We actually score ourselves regularly, and we score our national governing body partners to see how we can best help them move up the curve here. You know, most people start with kind of descriptive level analytics. That's when we were asking, like, are we winning? Like, you know, what is it? Oftentimes there's limited data or analytical efforts at that phase. They move to more reactive things like what just happened and why. You know, typically that's the time where there's some isolated analytical efforts that are starting to happen in pockets. And as people get more comfortable saying, like, oh, this can tell me something, you get to sort of like, so then, you know, what's happening now? Like, you know, as you get a full commitment to analytics and dedicated resources, then you can start to then not just explain like the what's happening, but understand why it's happening. I think that dedicated resources are oftentimes those people who spend enough time to be able to look for trends and understand the why. And as you have the why, being able to align all of this with business questions help you to really think about the impact. And then it helps you, look beyond what you're dealing with right now to reveal new analytics. I mean, we're somewhere between 3 and 4. It's taken us, 5 years to get there. I'm expecting to spend another, more than 5 years between, this level 3 and 4. I mean, this is in my opinion, a decade-long journey to think about how you basically grow along this towards success. So, I think, at this point it's 12:30. This is sort of the end of time. I think these slides can be shared. There are a few other things, some tips and tricks for telling stories that are at the end. But at this point, I think I'll pause, ask if there are any questions, and then we can move on. I see Rob here says we've been using Up metrics for our survey data collection and to aggregate analysis of survey data. Yeah, I mean, having a great survey tool is like the best, so important. Any questions from the group? Martin, any parting thoughts for the team here that you think might help them feel good, or anything else that you would share from a data analytical journey perspective?
The only thing I would add, Chad, and great presentation. I think this is really helpful and applicable to youth sports. Obviously, I would always encourage people, particularly given a lot of the youth sports clubs, non-profits, fundraising budgets are tough. COVID is a tough year. I would say if you can't, use that external vendor, to help you with, don't not do it. Find a way of doing it yourself, doing it as Chad said, on Excel, pulling that data. There are a lot of, good inexpensive software that you can at least get that information out. But I would lean, going back to your previous slide on that third leg of what you talk about, the storytelling. The data is only as good as your ability to look at it as a big picture of somebody that's running your organization. It's only one piece of the puzzle, and I would just encourage people to just because you get one piece of analysis or data to not make a knee-jerk reaction and a decision based on that one piece. Make sure you put it together with all the other information that you come in from your organization, whether that's, from your athletes, from your organization, from your HR, whatever it happens to be, is to make sure that you look at it as a whole and as a big picture before making particularly drastic, changes or decisions based on that information.
I love it. Well, Martin, thanks for your insights and helping connect us with the youth sport market. Thanks everyone for the time today. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My email, I think, is available for folks, which is chad.sunderland@usopc.org. And thanks to Jenny and the team for giving me the chance to share a little bit with you all.
And I'm here to thank you, Chad, and thanks to you, Martin. Appreciate both of your time today. Obviously, using and leveraging data is so important across any industry, but it's so cool to hear how you're using it in the sports world at the USOPC and at Steel Sports. So thank you again. So now we are heading into our networking break before our final workshop of the day. And I'll just remind you all that you can jump from table to table by double clicking, and just remember to turn on your mic and camera so that you can engage with people. And if you're having any trouble at all, feel free to visit the information booth or chat with someone that has NextUp staff in their name. You can also continue the conversation beyond today by joining the NextUp Slack community or by joining us at future events. Our next big event is our NextUp Soccer Summit, which is coming up May 31st. So we will see you back here at 3 o'clock for our final session today on how to think bigger with 3 Steps, David Gleason. So I will see you all then. And thanks again for taking the time to be here.